Robin Charlie here. I wanted to start this off. I was kind of curious on alcohol consumption. It seems like there's always a lot of coverage on it, particularly within the fitness community. I think it's pretty widely understood that it's not great for you, but there seems to be kind of a rash recommendation in terms of you should just quit, or it's always terrible for you, or it's going to kill your athletic performance. So I was a little curious to see how that really backed up with some of the data from academic findings. And it was pretty interesting just reviewing the methodologies utilized for alcohol consumption and athletic performance. And a lot of it is really pretty high volume alcohol consumption that they use for these studies. So they use an equation that's generally X amount of grams per the number of your body weight in kilos. So this could be 1 kilo. So for 1 kilo per kilograms of body weight, for, let's say, just converting it, let's say for a 200 pounder, that would be somewhere around 6 or 7 drinks, which is quite a bit. And there was one meta study done by this gentleman named Matthew Barnes, who took kind of a critical approach of how these studies have been done and the recommendations based off of them, because the recommendations had been essentially alcohol will kill your athletic performance, so don't do it. And he took a look at a bunch of these studies and really found that once you lower your consumption to 0.5 grams per body weight in kilos, that you're looking at pretty nominal reduction in performance. And he approached this from the perspective, this guy obviously works with athletes. He's from New Zealand, so a lot of the I think understandably a lot of the comparisons were to rugby players who have a pretty serious reputation for drinking hard after tournaments and after games. And said, it's just not realistic for these guys not to drink, right? It's part of the culture, it's embedded in it. So what information can we provide to help them still have fun with their team, but still be able to perform the next day? And so it came down to this 0.5 gram per body weight in kilos, having really pretty little impact across hydration, glycogen depletion, immune response, hormonal response, etc. All of the things that are often hammered when you get hammered. And so I'll link this stuff in the charts, but we're kind of able to establish, based off this 0.5 rule, some recommendations based on athlete body weight. So ranging from 100 pounds to 300 pounds, obviously the more you weigh, the more you can drink without significantly hampering your performance and or recovery. So for instance, if you've got a 200-pound guy, he's able to have 3.2 drinks without really hurting himself, right? And that's based off of a 5-ounce glass of wine, a 12-ounce can of beer at 5% ABV, or shots of whatever kind of liquor, assuming it's at 40% ABV. I would note, since like the IPA stuff is super popular, this rule does not apply to that, because that stuff is usually more ounces and more.
So you mean IPA beer? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because they're higher. They're higher ABV. So like a Coors Light or whatever is going to be around 5%, might be even a little bit lower. But on average, kind of your light beer is at 5% ABV, whereas an IPA is at 8, 10. They're pretty heavy, and they're super heavy on some of the nutritional facts. Go ahead.
So I guess what this probably tells, what this pretty much says is that if you're an athlete, you can go ahead and drink pretty healthily, and it's not going to affect you too much the next day, right?
Yeah, as long as you're kind of sticking to the recommended amounts, right? So once you go above that zero point 0.5 grams per body weight in kilos, that's when you really start to see a significant degradation in performance and recovery. But beneath that amount, it's nominal. So it's kind of just an interesting deal. Like, I think the bottom line is saying you shouldn't drink during athletic stuff, particularly for guys like rugby or baseball or any, really any sport. You got young guys. And this also certainly applies to military guys, law enforcement guys, fire guys. That's usually pretty heavy drinking. Same for the mountainside from my experience. If you can cut it, manage it to a pretty reasonable amount, you're not gonna kill yourself.
So for you, how many drinks would that be?
So I'm like 215. So that would be 3.3 drinks for me.
And would that, could you get a healthy buzz on 3 drinks?
I guess it depends how fast you drink. I think you could get I think I would get a little buzz, yeah. Probably, but you're definitely not getting drunk, which is
like 3 beers
good.
And would you feel that the next day?
No.
Yeah. Kind of common sense then. Yeah, I guess, it's kind of interesting. Kind of goes contrary thinking to what you kind of hear from people. It's kind of interesting because the most recent thing I've seen on alcohol, I don't have anything to cite, was that even a little bit of alcohol is bad for you, long-term effects. That was just a more general drinking study, but I just saw the headline. I haven't read that story, so this is a little bit contrary to that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, going like all of this stuff equates to like how often too, right? So just in terms of psychological dependency habits, you really don't want to be drinking more than 3 to 4 days a week at this level, right? If you're following these rules. And they found, from a dependency perspective, even if you're binge drinking it hard, 2 days a week, you're starting to get pretty close to that dependency level.
So if you're drinking 2 days a week, that you have a drinking issue?
Yeah, potentially from like a psychological and physiological perspective for dependency. You may start to be creeping in and on, and that's where kind of the bad shit happens with alcoholism and stuff like that. I certainly used to do that pretty heavily.
College days or?
Yeah,
Marine days?
Early 20s and stuff like that, yeah. But that's where it'll bang you up, and it can lead to some nasty stuff with alcoholism that, obviously is incredibly detrimental to health. But yeah, I'll publish this stuff. It's kind of interesting. I think it's a good easy rule of thumb. And I broke this out to some graphs that are pretty understandable for people to reference if they
especially if it's based on weight, right? Kind of know how much you can drink, and once or twice a week and be fine.
Yeah. I think the hard part is always like if you're drinking some whiskey, right. Are you really measuring 1.5 ounces, or are you taking 3 fingers, 4 fingers, ice, no ice, that kind of stuff? That's where it can get a little hairy. I was messing around to see. I have like a cup that I drink out of, and I was measuring to see like, all right, how much is it actually? And my pour is usually a little bit higher than 1.5. So
like how much higher?
Like a finger.
Got it. I guess some really interesting stories for read this week. The first one is on ROTC scholarships for Army. And there's a story that the Army has slashed $1 million from $100 million from the its ROTC scholarship budget for the remainder of this decade, which will result in over the 4 years remaining 2,500, 4,000 fewer commissioned officers. And so I guess there's a glut of Army officers right now. And according to the story, there are like 75,000 U.S. Army officers currently, and almost a third of those are captains. And so they're trying to cut down the number of Army officers. Just kind of shows, kind of the shrinking military that we have with the decrease in our overseas stuff, the changing politics in terms of U.S. Involvement in overseas wars. I think the budget stuff's going to start hitting it too. Anyway, there was also that said that there were like this year there were too many Army armor and infantry lieutenants, and they had to ask 250 of them to go to other branches, which must have broke the hearts of those lieutenants who had gone to those schools. So that's just kind of interesting, just in terms of the declining U.S. Military.
What's the impact of total budget? Does it say?
I didn't say. It's probably not very much, $100 million, and I think the U.S. military budget's like $800 billion or $750 or something. It's pretty high.
No, I know, but in terms of, you said it was they cut $1 million a year for
no, $100 million cut.
100.
For the remaining part of this decade.
Oh yeah, that's significant. I can't imagine that probably cuts it in half or a third or something like that.
Yeah, I took notes. If it's in there, I missed it, so I apologize. I don't have the answer for you. The next story was in the Atlantic Council and was about NATO spending. There were some pretty alarming statistics in NATO spending. This has always been a problem, and I think first Trump presidency, he kind of brought this up, and it's kind of been, I think, ongoing for a long time, but according to our Atlantic Council article, only 23 of the 32 NATO nations currently spend the requisite 2% of their gross domestic product, so 2% of their GDP on defense. And there were some really interesting statistics. It said says that Germany and the United Kingdom struggle to field anything bigger than brigade level forces right now. And each country has fewer tanks in their entire inventory than Russia adds to its own inventory every few months, which is alarming. Most principal NATO allies lack weapons, munitions, and supplies to carry out an operation longer than a few weeks' duration. It says a case in point is questionable whether the Dutch army is still able to defend its territory, having eliminated its remaining Leopard 2 tanks. So I guess the Dutch army doesn't even have any tanks anymore. The Belgian army, there's only 28,000 people in the Belgian army, which is kind of incredible. And he says even the French army, a former French army chief of staff, he's saying that the French army was not ready for a high-intensity war. So this is kind of a common complaint and pretty disturbing, I guess, I think, from a U.S. taxpayer perspective, that our allies are relying on us to cover them, and they're not even doing their fair share, which is minimal compared to what the U.S. is, and just in terms of dollar spending. There are some countries that are punching above their weight in the Northeast Corridor. Poland is, growing one of the, I think we talked about this last time or maybe offline. Poland currently has the third largest army in NATO, 216,000 personnel, and it wants to increase that to 300,000.
Yeah, rapidly. I was listening to a podcast with the Polish ambassador to the U.S., and it sounds like they're pretty, for obvious reasons, they're right on the border with Russia, but they have every intention of being the largest land army in Europe.
I think they only have like I think it was like 5 million people. I could be getting them mixed up with another country. but they have 250 Abrams and other tanks. Finland has 280,000 troops, and they're really Finland is the one, I think, with just 5.5 million people. And so the other countries up there, Norway, Sweden, Finland, are where the strongest. I guess they're all closer to Russia, clearly. But it's just disturbing, I think. There was some interesting stats of this. The U.S. has 85,000 troops in Europe currently. Most in Germany has the most of those troops. I didn't get a number how many U.S. troops are stationed in Germany currently, but this was surprising that the country with the largest deployment of U.S. troops or stationed troops is Japan. We have 50,000 troops in Japan. That must be in Okinawa. Did you ever go to Okinawa?
No, but lots of friends who were either stationed there or did the unit deployment program there.
So those are all mostly Marines, right?
Yeah. I don't think there's really a significant Army presence there. But yeah, Okinawa's that's a big base for sure. So there's guys who are permanently stationed there, which is a pretty healthy dose of guys, and then you have units that rotate through there. I think they always have one or two. I'm not sure at what level they deploy there, whether it's like a MEB style deal, but yeah, they always got a lot of guys there for sure.
So that's a continuing problem, and again, if I think certainly the U.S.'s defense policy and foreign policy is moving to constrict some of our forces and deployments and military activity outside the U.S., and I think this will continue that push with NATO countries not stepping up. There's another kind of a hidden story that I hadn't really heard about. I think this was in Task and Purpose, that in September, U.S. forces killed more than 36 members of terrorist groups in Syria in 2 airstrikes. And it's unclear if these were just airstrikes or if there were special forces involved too. But we took out some terrorist commanders. Anyway, it was just interesting to see that we are still so active there, and we have 900 troops inside Syria. So again, it doesn't say whether these are special forces activities or combos or just airstrikes, but we're definitely still fighting their war on terror in Syria, which doesn't get spoken about much anymore.
There was I listened to an interview with a Army brigade commander, and I guess parts of his brigade had been deployed to Syria. I think there's a couple of relatively large bases there, and they fought off, I think it was like 160 different drone attacks, and they were really the first U.S. military units to kind of have to deal with that in terms of like what it looks like right now, because there's all kinds of all the Iraqi militia groups. Most of them are right. I think everybody's right on the border of Iraq and Syria, because that's been a well traversed smuggling logistical route for ISIS and Al Qaeda before them. But they were getting attacked regularly on like a daily basis for quite some time. So they were figuring it out as they go with these new drone systems. And
let's go back in history. I can't remember, because when the civil war in Syria occurred. That
I
was
think that started in 2013.
2013, and it's still the country's still a large portion of it is not controlled by the government, right? Or um,
Yeah, but I think Bashar's still in there, but I don't think. I think it's kind of a total toss up. There's so many. I've talked to a couple friends who've done time there, and it's just a huge mishmash of all these different kinds of forces, and Hezbollah was in there, or not. I mean, it's just everybody who's anybody was
did
was
we
going there
have
to go
any?
fight it out.
I can't remember. I think the that civil war in Syria. I don't think. I wonder how much we were involved in trying to overthrow him or whatever. It just seems that this is a case where having a strongman in there made the region a little more stable in a weird kind of way, because these groups weren't running free in this kind of part of the country that is not controlled by anybody. In
Yeah,
other
well,
words, the
that's the
instability
argument,
is,
right?
yeah,
That's always the argument. It's the same argument with Iraq, right?
and
Devil
Libya,
you
right?
know or not. What's that?
And Libya, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ultimately, those were bad guys for sure. But whether or not better off with them or without them is certainly up for debate.
Anyway, I just didn't. You just don't hear about that anymore. I just didn't realize we were so still active there in Syria, or even keeping track of that. But clearly, we are. I see. Yeah, still on the military side, there's a story on the. I don't remember if you remember that case of that SEAL candidate who died of pneumonia a few years ago. I think he was, like a rower in college, and his mom brought it up, and he made it through buds, but then he died of pneumonia, and there was investigation, and it led to concerns about SEAL candidates using performance enhancing drugs, human growth hormone, and steroids and stuff, in an investigation. Anyway, a board of inquiry has been formed for the captain who was in charge of the BUDS training during that time, and I guess there'll be a decision whether or not he's forced to retire or whatever. But it just kind of brought this up again. I can't remember any. I'm sure a report has come out since that time about the overall BUDS training, but it kind of brings us up again. And there was some. It seemed like the Navy partly blamed his death on performance enhancing drugs, but his mother said it was a lack of medical care. And she said that 4 of the candidates had pneumonia, and it was bacterial pneumonia, and that's not caused by human growth hormone. They found human growth hormone in his vehicle or something. Mm-hmm. And the morning he died, he was twice given oxygen for signs of bacterial pneumonia. If I understand correctly, just after Hell Week, he was kind of laid down and never woke up, which is really sad, obviously. But anyway, it sounds like the Navy captain is going to be held to account somehow for that death on his watch. It'll be interesting to see what happens on the other side of that. Any comments about that at all? Because
yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird deal. I guess I don't know. I don't know anything about the PEDs. I guess, I mean, Hell Week sounds like a hell of a time, right? Because it's named for a reason. So I guess be a little surprised that there's not some more health monitoring. Because I remember reading that story, and it was like, it came down to like his friends tried to take him to the hospital a couple times, and he said no, no, no. And then, like you said, kind of laid down and didn't wake up, which sucks. And they've had some deaths there before. It's always hard to tell. I don't know. I mean, haven't ever been there. So you just don't know how professionally it's run. I assume it's professionally run, right? But it's also super challenging. And lots of guys get banged up. I mean, I think the injury rate there is like through the roof. So it's kind of a tough deal. I know I think that captain has gone outside of the military chain and has like made some public statements and interviews, basically I think defending himself and defending his staff. It's hard to tell. I don't know. It's one of those things. It's like it would be easy to armchair quarterback, but you just don't know what really happened, right? And how it happened and whether or not anybody was negligent, because that's the only thing that matters, right? People die in training. That's an unfortunate part of it, but does that mean somebody was negligent? I don't know. I mean, the death rate in terms of like training deaths, the death rate for Halo jump stuff is through the roof. You've always got guys. It seems like there's a couple every year from various special operations units hitting the ground.
Yeah, but I mean, schools like this. I remember there were a couple hypothermia deaths at Ranger School a few years ago during the Florida exercise when they were down in the swamp and they were. I guess it's just wet down there and happened a cold spill came through, and a couple of Ranger candidates died of hypothermia. But a school like this, an actual death, I don't know. I've never heard of an actual death in a school like this or a selection. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's more injuries for sure. But go ahead.
There's definitely been deaths for sure. I've read about several of them, and it seems like it's pretty frequently related to hypothermia or pneumonia issues. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, what do you do to change it?
Apparently he had contacted his mom during. I don't know. It seemed like during Hell Week you wouldn't be able to call your mom. But his mom said he contacted her and told, maybe it was before Hell Week, but according to this story, the young candidate told his mom that candidates were being denied medical care during selection with the goal of forcing them to quit. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this. And I guess there'll be more stuff brought up at this inquiry or the board of inquiry for this captain. Anyway, unfortunate for sure. Let's see. Okay, Nick. No, kind of pivot to the mountainside. There was a decision came out of the Forest Service Lake Tahoe district, which is concerning e-bikes, and it authorized e-bike use on 113 miles of trails in the Tahoe area, which were previously non-motorized. So this is just kind of an interesting or significant shift. This is the first time I've seen this. There's been a push by the e-bike industry and especially the mountain bikers, the mountain bike e-bike industry, which is pretty much all of them, I think, now make mountain bikes that have some motors in them, to change trails from just regular mountain bike use to e-bikes to allow e-bikes. But it's been consistently resisted by environmental groups, hunting groups, and others. And this is the first time I've seen a decision. And not only in this forest district are they switching the designation of these trails, but they're constructing around 30 miles of new trails just for e-bike use. This is kind of in your world a little bit, just because it's so much mountain biking you do. And my just I don't own a mountain bike, but not a mountain e-bike, I guess. But just my observation of it is the motors and the batteries have gotten smaller and smaller and more hidden and hidden, and it's pretty difficult to see unless you know what you're looking for, whether or not a mountain bike has a motor in it or not. Have you seen a lot of motorized mountain bike use on trails you ride that they shouldn't be there?
No, I think people
People
follow
pretty
that rule.
they're pretty
Yeah,
respectful.
yeah, it is pretty easy to tell. Um, the difference between an e-bike and a regular mountain bike. Even the newest ones, you can catch them pretty quick. Um, the debate is I don't really, I'm not super ingrained in the mountain bike community at large. But it is such a funny um, there's such a funny resistance to the e-bikes within mountain biking itself. Like for here in Montana, you can't do it anyways because the Forest Service won't allow it. I'm not sure how large the Forest Service districts are, but they essentially, whatever the district size is, they make the decision in terms of access, what can access and when, for their region or district. And by all accounts, the Montana Forest Service is pretty strict on that stuff, and doesn't sound like they're willing to open things up to e-bikes. I've never even been on an e-bike, but it does seem, particularly around here, the riding is really straight up and then pretty straight down for the most part. So it's always hard climbing, which means, without the e-bike, you're cutting off a pretty significant amount of people in terms of like just entry into the sport. So if you got an older guy, let's say a guy who's in his 60s, has been riding his bike forever, but just can't, pedal like he once did and still wants to get out there, I feel like, to me, that guy should be allowed to do it. What's the harm? I don't know if they've done any studies on what the impact is to the trail itself with e-bikes, because they certainly are heavier. I think they're usually about 25 pounds heavier. So that's certainly something, but I'm not sure if it tears up the trail or what the case may be. It always seems like it's like a artificial, to me, my opinion, it seems like it's a artificial fitness barrier that has been put in place that really kind of cuts out a lot of people who might otherwise want to get into the sport.
Oh yeah, boy, I'm totally on the other side with you. Definitely oppose e-bikes on motorized trails. I see a slippery slope there. Um, they don't really buy your argument about the older guy who's approaching 60. um, the slippery slope is okay. If that's the reason, then why not just allow four wheelers? Um, there's been a really negative impact of four wheelers in the Mountain West on hunting, not only in terms of hunting quality, but also on other non-hunters' perception of hunters, because it seems like the hunters who rely on four wheelers don't stick to the roads. They'll go off road a lot, and if they do kill something, they'll cut trails, and it's just been a scourge and a pretty major issue. And then from the e-bike issue, they make hunting specific e-bikes now, and if they open up trails to it, it would allow more and more people to get in the backcountry further back to hunt, which would decline the hunting back there. Right now, the ticket to get back there is effort, and that's the reward. You put the effort in, and the reward is you get better hunting, and that would be taken away. So, yeah, I'm definitely on the other side of this. I think this is a sad thing. I imagine there'll be lawsuits on it, but it'll be interesting to see if it maintains and if it spreads to other districts, because I know there is pressure to allow e-bikes out there. I mean, one of the difference between e-bikes and motorized, motorbikes or motorcycles is, no noise for sure. So they're not as environmentally disturbing to other users, I guess. But they're still motorized, and I would say cheating for people who want to get back there. But you're obviously on the other side, Charlie.
Oh, I just don't see I can understand the slippery slope aspect of it for hunting, but I mean, you can't ride a quad on single track, So, I mean, maybe I'm just looking at this like distinctly from the sport. Now, it'd be one thing if somebody showed me that e-bikes do significant damage to the trail. I would change my mind probably. I'm just not sure if that's the case. I've heard that argument, but I haven't really seen it. And I went riding just kind of backcountry with a friend. He had an e-bike, and I mean, that thing was light. It didn't look like it was tearing up anything. And we were just kind of going on single wide road. Now that's different than single track, obviously, but dirt is dirt. So I'm not sure. But to me, there's, especially locally, it's a tough deal. They allow it, and I know, like, I was riding recently with this guy from California. He was a very, very high level mountain biker, kind of on the downhill side, and he said he rode his e-bike. That's the only thing he rode in California, in Southern California, where he lives. And I know there's a bigger biking and dirt biking community there, but I think the land is maybe state, or maybe the Forest Service has allowed it. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I have an e-bike just for running around town and stuff, and I love the thing. I would never go back to a regular bicycle, but that's not a mountain bike, obviously. But yeah, I think you might see an impact if you go back, and it would definitely increase the use of the trail, so be more impact, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, but you would definitely, I think, see more people on it than there are now, which would could impact your experience. But again, I think this is a slippery slope, and I'm disappointed in this decision. And I hope somebody sues and gets it changed. But it could set a precedent for the rest of the Forest Services. So we continue to keep places wild in the face of technology here. Okay, moving on. Kind of back to a little bit of fitness and diet. There's a study that came out, the best weight loss prevention diet, which is the study group were really obese people. Like the average weight was 210 pounds and average size was 5'5". So these are pretty obese people. But they just told them to eat vegetarian, no caloric restriction, no increase in exercise. And all these people, or the people in the study, all lost weight, like 26 pounds or something, which isn't significant. But what is significant is after a year, they were still they'd still lost weight. And most of the diet studies come out where they have caloric restrictions and exercise requirements. People quickly gain the weight back. Anyway, I've read even the book we recommend, How We Get Fat, Tobbs. In there, his recommendations for this diet is, to eat healthy, mostly vegetables, mostly plant-based. I've never done I've never even tried to do a vegetarian diet. It might be interesting to try it and see how it does. But I have seen from a longevity perspective, some longevity studies where older people seem to be healthier and live longer if they just eat vegetables. I'm not too sure. Some of the data comes back just from some of the toxins that might be in meat that you get passed down. There was another story about like mercury in tuna, how much tuna should you eat because of mercury. Anyway, having impacts on your health or whatever. But this is just interesting in terms of a vegetarian diet. Have you ever tried to be gone vegetarian before? I've never tried it at
Fuck,
all.
fuck no. Absolutely not. No, I mean,
Yeah, I'm more open
I,
to it. I might try it, but go ahead.
I like meat. Life is worth living. Um, I mean, I guess it makes sense if you're significantly overweight, and there needs to be a pretty massive adjustment to your living because your diet and your corresponding weight is impacting the quality of your life. The conditions are different, but I'm still a pretty fit dude, and I like meat, so I'm gonna eat meat.
I know that one of the studies that we did, just we haven't done too many nutrition studies, but we took our um, nutritional recommendations, which are kind of avoid bad carbs, avoid sugar, um, try to avoid alcohol most of the week. And we took one study group who did that, and then we had another study group, and we just said just avoid sugar. And at the end of the 3 week study, both groups had lost the same amount of weight. It's not clear in here if these people were also told to avoid sugar, which I assume they did, which could result in the same effect if they were just able to quit eating sugar. Um, just that would be refined sugar. There wasn't data on there if they were told not to eat fruit, which has a lot of sugar in it. Anyway, we do know that from our own work and just the stuff I've seen, if you just cut out sugar, it really goes a long way towards refined sugar, towards making you more healthy and cutting weight. Um, but just interesting, I think, in terms of vegetarian diet. I am open to it. I might try it someday. I don't know. I know what it would look like though. So you'd have
Well,
to
that's
take a look
probably
at
it,
this.
right? I mean, I wonder if it's the weight loss was occurred because of something to do with it being a vegetarian diet, or if it's because you can only stuff your face with so much lettuce before you don't want to eat anymore, and so now you're just naturally going into a caloric deficit, which will lead to weight loss.
Yeah, or that's interesting. I don't know. Anyway, and I guess finally, I got something that's kind of interesting. Just kind of follow along. I've been following along just on the economic, just the electric vehicle production. And there was something economists that worldwide automakers have cut their planned um, EV goals by 4 million cars by 2030. And so they plan on building 27 million electric vehicles in 2030. Now that's dropped down to 23 million. And the reason is just a decrease in demand, which is just interesting. I think, and contrary to what we had seen, I have seen recently where the most electric vehicles are purchased and produced in China, for sure, and then Europe is kind of follows along, but there's just a decrease in demand for whatever reason. I know in the U.S. there's been hesitancy to adopt because of charging stations and range anxiety, and I know that Ford had moved from producing EVs. I don't think the Lightning, its electric F-150s sales have been stagnant or slower than expected, but their sales of the hybrid F-150s, which are, I guess they have batteries in them, but also have a internal combustion engine, have been vigorous. And I remember looking at stats at one of those hybrids and, how much power they had, but also what you could charge, in terms of tools, running your tools out of the bed with the battery. That was really interesting for working men for sure. But this is just, I think, interesting. I've seen more and more environmental impact from these vehicles in terms of just being heavier. There was some news report I saw about electric semi trucks that they're so heavy because of the batteries that they have significant impacts on bridges and roads. And then also the idea that after 10 years or whatever, when your battery in your electric vehicle eventually it's going to degrade over that time and then die, there's not an easy way to replace it. So there might be a shelf life on some of these vehicles, and then therefore you got the disposal for them. Anyway, there's just always more to it, and I thought this was just really interesting from an economic perspective.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of that is American car manufacturing hasn't done a good job with their electrical vehicles anyways. So really there's two companies, well, really just one, Tesla, that has done a decent job. But I mean, even I don't know the model numbers, but kind of their traditional sedan ones. I have a couple friends who have them and really like them, but they live in cities or just outside of cities where it makes sense. Out here, it would not make sense, right? The range just doesn't make sense, or it doesn't work with just how far everything is from itself. But it's been
it seems like because in the West you need to have the internal combustion engine vehicle just to, if you wanted to travel anywhere. I think even daily you're not traveling 200 miles, so. But then you need just an EV just to drive around town, and then another vehicle. You can't have one vehicle for both, which is an issue, obviously. But I do like the idea of being able to never go to a gas station again and just charge at your house. But if you can't, the range anxiety is just. And then not only that, I've just I've seen where even when you do go to a charging station, it takes quite a bit of time to charge up the battery.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of hours.
Yeah, I mean, you're sitting around. The technology definitely needs some work for sure. But I do remember, and they mentioned this here, that when all the U.S. companies, GM and Ford and Volvo, which is European, but were all stating that they were going to go totally EV by a certain time. The Toyota CEO came out and said, "Whoa,
yeah.
we're just gonna do hybrids and focus on hybrids." And boy, he was really criticized back then for not being green or not seeing where the market's going, and he's been proven correct for sure. Hybrids, Toyota hybrids are bigger sellers. Although I took a look, I just saw as part of this, I wanted to see if because I've had a couple Toyota trucks, loved them, but their gas mileage sucked. And so I hang on a sec, please. And so I took a look at just the Toyota Tacoma hybrid to see what its gas mileage was, and it was only like 22 to 24 miles per gallon, which is probably better than the regular V6, but not what I would expect. I guess from a hybrid, I would expect more.
Yeah, they haven't seemed to have figured out the truck SUV market for hybrids, because I think there's been a couple releases for different brands, but Toyota included, if my memory serves, and they just don't. That's just not a significant increase in your mileage, but which is surprising, just because I was a proud Prius owner for about 3 years when I lived on the East Coast. That car was fucking awesome, and I was getting 40 plus miles to the gallon. I'm not sure why it hasn't translated to trucks and SUVs.
I do remember that the new Ford Maverick came out, and there was one of those that just had I don't know if it was hybrid, but it was getting like 40 miles per gallon too. Like a small, it could have just been a small engine, but I thought it was hybrid. I'm trying to look it up right now, but probably don't have time. Anyway, I'm surprised they just don't get more because they're more expensive, right? You got I don't know what else. If you're not getting the mileage out of them, where do you what's the benefit?
Yeah, what's the point? Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if there'll ever be. I'm hoping there will be a better hybrid. Because the hybrid truck makes sense for me, right? Because I'm not hauling anything significant. If you're hauling cattle trailers, obviously you need a big ass engine, but for dorks like me, I just need a truck that I can throw my bike in and throw some lumber in from time to time for little house projects. So that's about it. So I don't need the giant hauling capacity. But for whatever reason, that hasn't quite happened yet.
Yeah, I love the idea of having the same truck and getting 50 miles per gallon.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I've got this week, Charlie.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Rob.
Okay, talk to you later.